because I suppose if you look at it, the challenge is that the standards regime have evolved, and they've evolved to a current set, a shape that they currently represent. But of course, things can evolve to a place that could be the wrong place or may not suit where we are now. And I think the one thing I would say to you, and this again is off conversations from our membership, is that none of the members I've spoken to are afraid of change.
Yeah.
They're not about protectionism. They're not about maximising profit to the detriment of quality.
Well, I'd assume they wouldn't be part of your gang.
No, they
if
wouldn't.
They were.
No, the one, and I know you're aware of this, but you can't just write a cheque and join the ASFP.
No, exactly.
There's a criteria that people have to
So, in
meet.
a sense, we're not talking about your members.
No, we're talking about people that clearly for all sorts of reasons want to constantly elevate themselves to a position that means that it gives their business a level of robustness for future growth, future development. And I think that's something that our members are very mindful of. We have involvement from members at varying degrees. Some of our members are very involved in what we do. Some are less so. But I think if you ask them all, they would say that because they're members, and they're members because they've met the current criteria, that it effectively gives them a position within the industry of being part of something that is much stronger than they are in themselves. So there's empowerment by collective responsibility. And none of them, I think, would say that isn't something that they want to continue and develop with and raise the bar. So we were talking off camera before about this competency pathway we're developing. Third-party certification was a prerequisite of membership for the ASFP, going back quite a number of years now. And that was great. When we first started it, not many people had third-party certification. So, of course, it raised the bar. Now we're in a position where lots of companies have got it, and not all of those are ASFP members. And therefore, it's the inflationary level of the number of people or companies have got it has, in some respects, reduced the value of it as a thing. So we now have to raise the bar again for membership and the requirements of membership into this competency pathway.
Which for me is right. It feels right.
Yeah.
So the idea is actually you're constantly improving standards in the sector.
Yes.
That must be the right approach.
It is. But what I would say is the members, that we raise it with the members and then we help the members over the wall that we've now built a number of levels, a number of courses on top of. And I think that the 476 thing is interesting on a whole series of levels. But I think what our position would be is that we will constantly look to do the right thing, support the right motivation, the right motivations, and look to make sure that how these transitions work are done in a way that, as you touched on, don't leave a huge void between moving away from one and moving into the other. Because I think with all of these things, it's how you transition from one to the other is how you would measure the success of that, moreover than actually arriving at the destination you've sort of wanted to get to.
Yeah, like I said, on the specifics of 476, I must be clear,
of course,
unfortunately, that we're consulting on it. So it's with HSE to advise government,
of course,
both in terms of whether it should happen and in terms of the transition.
Yeah.
Right? So I should be really clear about that.
In the world of potatoes that are hot, pick this one up and you'll probably find it's probably one of the hottest ones that is available to pick up.
But like I said, those principles are critical in my mind.
They are, and we agree on that basis. And I think we'll put. I mean, we're getting lots of questions about it. We're already sort of engaging with all sorts of people on it, and it'll be interesting to see where HSE's recommendations end up obviously back into government, and where that sort of comes out of in terms of engaging with organisations like ASFP, I suppose, in terms of that. So just moving on, we'll move off the 476 subject because, as you say, it's in very early stages, and it's not. I think you're going to get more questions, and anyone's going to be able to give answers for the foreseeable future. But
I should say I'm acutely aware of the issues in the sector. So it's not like we're going into this blind.
It's common with all of these things, isn't it? Something, a question is popped out, and the floodgates of the questions open before any sort of tangible sort of elements of solution has been given. So in terms of, so just moving on. So I've got a couple of questions here actually. So I'm going to confess we did a bit of research and sort of went out to some of the great and the good of the passive fire industry. Some of them I know you've met, Chandru, and are not backwards in coming forwards.
I won't comment on whether they're great or good.
They'll tell you they are wonderful. They'll tell you they are.
Yeah, they are. They are wonderful.
So in terms of a question we've got, they've got one of the questions is His Majesty's government. I have to keep practicing that. His Majesty's government intentions with respect to secondary legislation on construction products, especially time frame. Will there be further consultation? Is a question that came in.
Yeah. So I'm very keen that what we do on construction products reform is not a surprise, but actually we engage people. So even before a consultation. I'm hoping my teams are now engaging the sector, and if they're not, they will be very shortly. So there is something about consultation is the last chance saloon in my mind. Formal consultation. Actually, there's a real opportunity to engage and shape how the reforms look and feel. So by the time that we announce something, it's not a surprise to anybody. And then once you announce it, of course, I can't commit to consulting, but my intention would be to make give people the opportunity to really understand and see it as a whole and comment properly. So it's for government ministers to decide on the exact process, but certainly we have permission to engage the sector and really understand what you want. And so that we can create a more simple and safe regime.
Yeah. Okay. No, and I think that is a fair statement. I think, and in terms of our the consultation, we consult on all sorts of things in the sense that we sit within these groups. For BSI and various other associations. I mean, there's the EAPFP, which of course is the European Association for Passive Fire. There's the PFPF, that's the Passive Fire Protection Forum. There's the FSA, the Fire Sector Federation, and we sit on all of those along with our peers in the FPA, the Fire Protection Association, the FIA, Fire Industry Association. So
the key principle here is I'm really keen that there's no surprises here.
Yeah,
and we engage and we talk, and actually it's more open. Than you would imagine. Yeah,
well, the trouble with surprises is people can't gear towards surprises, can they? And of course, that creates a problem in itself. So one of the questions was, are safety critical products still a thing?
So are they still a thing? They must be, mustn't they? Because there are products which are critical to safety, right?
Yes.
So on the one hand, the flippant answer is that.
Yeah.
What's absolutely clear in the question is that actually, are we going to introduce a safety critical products regime in regulation? We are consulting on, we're engaging on reform. So it's not that we are saying no to it or we're saying yes to it. In a sense, we'd like to engage and talk to people about it. My view is I can't see a world where you don't have some products which you say are critical to safety.
Absolutely.
And you have stronger controls and regulations around them. I don't see a world where that can not be true. And so really it's a question of how do you make that become true?
Yeah.
Whether that is exactly in the way that we intended when we introduced the Building Safety Act, which of course was introduced under the old EU regime. So we had to look at workarounds in relation to that old regime, or whether it's something different, I think that's really up for debate and for challenge and for question.
I think one of the interesting challenges will be, and it's because of the current structure, I suppose, is that I know, historically there was an idea that all safety critical products should be third party certified. But of course the certification schemes are run by certifying bodies, which in themselves are effectively commercial businesses. And our experience of that is that there are certain products, systems or installation schemes which are by quantum more attractive than others.
Yeah.
So there are certain parts of our industry, there's certain products which maybe only have 2 or 3 manufacturers. So there's a ceiling on the commercial attractiveness of running a scheme for that by virtue of the number of manufacturers or possibly installers that would sign up to it.
Yeah.
Because their costs are relatively constant. For if you run a scheme for every manufacturer or installer, if as a basic maths, if you've got 10 companies, you need 1 person in that certification company running that scheme with those 10 companies. Yeah. If you get another 10, you need to employ another person. So in very simple terms. And one of the challenges with that is of course, if there are products or systems or installation schemes which are not commercially attractive, but that particular product is deemed safety critical, how do we, and I'm sort of looking in the mirror on this one, how do we encourage the certification bodies to create and deliver and run schemes for quite small sections of this very broad spectrum of passive fire products and systems?
So I'll be honest, I don't know all the answers here.
No.
I'll give you some thoughts. The first thing I should say is the reason I sort of is because exactly where you went, just because a product is deemed safety critical and you can rely on its performance and it has greater insurance structures, actually it's meaningless if it's installed badly.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. And so it's meaningless if it's combined with other products and then installed badly. So it's this thing of what we shouldn't do is give people a false sense of confidence that just because you've got a product, suddenly your design and your build is safe.
Yes.
Right. And so third-party certification, both for products and for installation, for me is important. I think it's very important, actually. But we have a problem with third-party certification schemes as well, if I'm honest. So if tomorrow I wanted to start one, I could.
Yes.
That's inherently wrong.
You'd need a lot of insurance, but you could.
But it's inherently wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And so the question really is, what are the standards we are holding third-party certification bodies to?
Yeah.
And I remember when I first started this journey, I asked the sector to come up with some ideas on this, and they did. And the BSI was working on some stuff as well. But really, we need to have real clarity on the standards that enable people to call themselves certification bodies.
Yes.
And then demonstrate how they are constantly operating at that level. Right. So that is an area that I do think we still need to address.
I know in the executive summary of the Morale Bell report that cert bodies were mentioned, and I think there's certain critical areas in the whole relationship between designing and constructing and occupying buildings. Architects are critical. Main contractors are critical because they are the top of the whole body politic of putting the things up effectively. And the cert bodies are, because the majority of cert bodies also have labs. I know there are some cert bodies that don't have labs, but they're critical to this whole, how this evolves. And I agree with you. I mean, a lot of standards don't have a second part or an addendum to the product standard that tells you how you should install it. Exactly. There are some, but they're in the minority. And of course, the other part is in relation to, and I've lost my train of thought, and I'll think of it in a second, and it's gone, but it doesn't matter. So there was a slight second question to this.
So let me finish this if I may.
Okay.
So really the question is, how do you get the right organisations funding the development and the ongoing running of these certification schemes?
Yes.
Right? Now, it could be the members, it could be trade associations, it could be manufacturers, or it could be developers. And I don't know the answer, and I suspect the answer will be different in different sectors. But what I do know is I think they're incredibly important.
They are massively. The bit I just forgot about but remembered is we work in two areas. Well, we work in three. We work in products, but there's two types. There's systems, which is a finished article. So a fire damper, fire door set, fire curtain set, it's a finished product made up of a combination of parts. And then we work in products, tubomastic, fire bat, board, collars, pillows, and those are products that you bring together to give a solution. System, Now the difference is if you've got a 500 by 500 fire and smoke rated damper that you've put into a fire partition, it's 500 by 500 and it's been tested, and the performance of that thing is recorded and can be listed, etc. If you have a 300 by 300 hole that's got a whole series of penetrations running through it, and you use a series of products, the combination of a 300 hole with those services running through it and the products that you use has a very high chance that that's never been brought together in that configuration before, and therefore it will not have been tested ever. And that's one of the big problems between this relationship between principal designer and principal contractor. The contractors are ending up with trying to find solutions that either weren't designed in the first place, or they bring them together as a solution and no one can give them a ticket on it.
No, I see.
And I think that's so for us, systems are easier because they're a finished thing. Combination of products is much harder because the proliferation of variation is massive, and that's the big challenge that we face.
I see that. Like I said, I think the principal designer, contractor work for accountability purposes.
Yes.
I'm not sure they quite work necessarily without some other interactions and other links in the system for actually making sure the designs and everything.
And that's what needs to improve, I think. And I think that's where it goes. So just moving on. So another question was, so how can trade associations assist in the provision of safe construction products? And I think you've touched on this, that you're very keen to get all of the respective trade bodies, associations that represent all parts of the construction sector to get, to lead and to collaborate.
Yeah. So as a trade association, you have to show value to your members. Otherwise, no one's going to want to be a member.
Yeah.
For me, the critical value that trade association gives is that leadership, both in terms of engaging other sectors, engaging government, but also leadership in helping their members navigate what is an increasingly complex environment. And it's not complex necessarily because of the regulations, but although that might be, we should simplify it, but it's complex because of the context of the economy, doing business, the commercials, and the job of the trade association, I think, is that critical leadership, a holistic leadership that it gives its members.
Yes.
And that's the value that I think it brings.
Yeah, and it's holistic investment because, believe it or not, good trade associations, generate a surplus because, of course, most, if not all, trade bodies are non-for-profit organisations. There's no shareholders. Yeah. There's no dividends to pay. And of course, the beauty of that is, of course, you can't buy a trade association. We're not for sale, thank God. So on that basis, I think it's interesting to sort of go down that route of how a trade association invests, because we're currently investing in certain things through Working Group 2. We're investing in this competency pathway. Other trade bodies will be sitting on surpluses, surplus I don't quite sure the terminology, which they could use to invest in the development of all of the things that we've just been talking about for the last sort of 45, 50 minutes to improve standards and quality for their membership. Because if you look at the ASFP's main reason for being, it's to improve things and I won't go into it verbatim, but it's to effectively improve standards for our members and the wider industry. So that gives us a remit that we can invest in a broader scope, albeit all within in the confines of the passive fire sector.
So for me, if I was to mention the top 3 or 4 things in my head in terms of investment for industry, competency, traceability, cross-sector operations, digitization, consumer information. Those are the key things off the top of my head where I think actually we're just scratching the surface. And for us to really make a step change in those areas is going to require investment. I don't think the investment from one trade association or one sector is sufficient. I think what is done for one will benefit all. And so actually, how do you come together and pool resources to think about, competency, to think about traceability, to think about how you work across sectors, to think about how you might challenge standards, to whistleblow and provide assurance. It's those sorts of things which I...
No, you're absolutely right. And collectively, the associations coming together to support their respective elements should hopefully start to close up some of those gaps. And we're fully aware. We know that government is not going to do this for us. We know the expectation is that industry needs to develop and improve itself, given the guidance and the key pointers and the critical elements from your department and the other, health and safety executive and other departments. So we know this is it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of governance, effectively, that we know we have a responsibility to deliver on. And I talk to my peers in other trade associations. No one is effectively shying away from it. It's
the thing which I always think is we're not in the business of selling ice lollies.
No,
right?
although there is a trade association for that, Chandru.
But we're not in that business. And actually what we're in the business of holding on to a sector that will outlive us.
Yes.
And the assets that it creates, even in our lifetime, will outlive us. And so really we have this privileged position of being guardians, if you like, of the integrity and the standards of this sector and what we pass down, both in terms of what we do for future generations, but also in terms of what the future generations inherit from us as a sector and what they take forward.
Yes.
And it's that longer term view which I think if we all grip and we all grasp and we realise our individual importance and our collective responsibility, we can, as a country and as a sector, really step forward together.
Yes.
Rather than constantly worrying or fighting or thinking about the commercial pressure against us. Because actually, if we embrace that, we start to work a little bit more collaboratively. And
I think, I've sort of maintained this view of myself that I'm a custodian of legacy. In that sense, and my job is in my position is to sort of guide. I'm the custodian of the ASFP. Our members own this trade association; it's theirs. I'm merely a custodian of it, but part of my job and our council's job is to guide and create that legacy for future people. So just moving on very quickly. In terms of, we touched on certification bodies. One of the questions that did come in is how can certification bodies, and the ASFP has about 7 of them as members, and they have all the same rights and privileges as any of our other members. So it says, how can certification bodies assist in the provision of safe construction products? And I think we've touched on that they are clearly critical to what's going to happen over the next few years.
Yeah, there's also something for me about how certification bodies share information amongst themselves. So is it right that I can be struck off certification body A and sign up to certification body B?
Yes.
And it's actually how do they work collaboratively together to again realise that they are operating in the public good, not just solely in their commercial interests. And that for me is an area which we need to explore more.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, and I won't, that is a question. It's a conversation I've had with a number of our certification body members, and I think that is something that they are more conscious of than they've ever been before. I'm not going to say that they've discussed it themselves, because I don't know if they have, but it's certainly been raised with them more over the last 6 months than it probably has the prior few years. And it's a sensitive area because it brings into play GDPR, it brings into play all sorts of issues to deal with. But you're right.
Not if you require the company that you're registering to declare,
of course,
whether they have been struck off,
yes,
or whether they were a member of another scheme.
Yeah.
And if they declare wrongly, they automatically get struck off. There are ways around most things in life.
Yes, of course. Yes. By the way, I'm not giving you an excuse not to do it. I'm saying that I'm minded that within some of my conversations that very particular subject has been raised, but I can't tell you what the outcome is, because that wasn't part of the conversation. But I know it has been raised. Okay, and then let's just quickly. One of the questions was, will Gateway 2 and 3 happen this year, bearing in mind the secondary legislation to enable them should have been approved, I think, by last February. And I think the first thing I'd say is we know that things get marked and things may slip, because there is so much to all of the things we've been talking about that if you look at it as a building project, normally building projects take 25% longer to finish than you first thought and cost 25% more than you thought they were going to cost when you started it. So there's always going to be a natural sort of movement.
So I'd need to go away and check whether they should have been published last February.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind the Act only came into being in July last year, I think that's probably wrong. But are we intending to start the new regime, Gateway 2, Gateway 3, this year? We are still planning to. It will be subject to transitional arrangements, of course.
Yeah.
And they need to be published, and hopefully that will happen soon.
Okay. And all of these, I'm assuming all of these documents that give people, give organisations or people guidance, they are all freely available on the government website under your department.
So, a number of things need to happen before all of that can take place. But to date, we haven't said it's been delayed. There's no intention to delay.
Yeah.
The clear focus is making sure we hit the timelines. And so I would not discourage anyone from moving ahead with that. That's our intention. That's our plans.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good. So that's good reassurance. I think with all of these things, certain organisations or people are focused on certain things that are probably more critical to them than other things. And of course,
I think it's incredibly important that we get the secondary legislation published and guidance set out clearly, particularly around transitional arrangements, which the sector will be very, very interested in. And so, the sooner we get all of that done, the better. And
Good.
I'm very keen to.
Excellent. No, well, we look forward to seeing that. So another question was, and this sort of goes back to the things we were talking about before, because there's so many organisations that are sort of now involved in this, and I think one of the things I mentioned before about our members is they're not quite sure. Some cases even where to begin to look, and so it was. The question was, how will government manage fire safety now that it's split between 5 bodies effectively: Home Office, Department of Levelling Up, HSC, OPSS, and DBT.
Okay, so it's a lovely description of 5 bodies. In truth, it's a lot more than that, because local authorities have responsibility as well, so you add 450 to that.
Yes, of course.
But Home Office have responsibility for fire and rescue services.
Mm-hmm.
We have responsibility for the Building Safety Act and the Building Safety Regulator, I should say.
Yes.
And DBT have responsibility for the Office for Product Safety and Standards. So in reality, it boils down to 3 departments in theory, but the National Construction Products Regulator is responsible to us, our department. So that boils it down to 2 departments, and we work really closely. So the Home Office colleagues actually work just 2 floors above me in London, in our London offices. We have other offices, you'll be pleased to know, particularly in Wolverhampton and Leeds.
Of course.
But we work very closely with Home Office colleagues.
Yeah.
But they are, they're responsible for the fire safety order and the fire and rescue services. Our responsibility and interest are in the National Construction Products Regulator, the Building Safety Regulator, and all of the legislation that underpins building and management of buildings. Now that said, there was a time when it was all in one department. I do recognise that. Yeah. And you will always hear the arguments to and for that. For me, the critical thing is about working collaboratively together rather than how things are divided and split between ministerial responsibilities. And we have a really good relationship between the two departments currently.
Okay. In terms of where you are with how things are progressing, we see this as it's a long-term investment on so many levels: resource, money, time, all for the right reasons. The good thing about trade associations is that they have nothing to gain by doing the right thing effectively. They have everything to lose by not doing the right thing. If you could give our members and probably the broader passive fire industry a message, what would it be?
So I would agree with you. This is a long-term program, and it's a long-term change program. And we shouldn't be able to recognise where we started from in 5-10 years' time.
No.
And I think it goes beyond that.
Yeah.
Because this is about generational change as much as this is about system change or systems and processes change. And so what would I tell the sector? I'd tell the sector, this isn't easy. I recognise it isn't easy. But this is going to be something we all look back on over our careers with immense pride. Because we didn't let the opportunity of driving change get dissipated by the pursuit of profits. And if we can hold on to the fact that we drive change, in life I tend to think, and I hope others think this as well, that the value of being alive and being part of life is more about how we make other people's lives better rather than how we make our own lives easier. And so that would be the one thing I would say to the sector. Let's keep going on at this. We're all in this together. We in government need to change. We recognise that we are. I think industry recognises it needs to change. And we can do this. We can.
And again, thank you so much for your support and coming in and talking to us and our members and anybody else that's watching. Thanks for coming in.
Mate.
Lovely.
Appreciate it.
Lovely to see
Really
you. Thank you.